guys, I'm Jonathan. This is Bi-vocational Ministry. I wanted to do kind of a recap of my 2022 and kind of tell you what I'm preparing for and for 2023. Usually in the wintertime, this is a great time for me to do this. Usually in the wintertime, I really try to think through, okay, the whole last year, what was my year like? What did I do? What did I do well? What would I change? And then I use that and I say, okay, what goals did I have early last year, like in January of 2022? What goals did I have? Did I meet those goals? What goals did I not meet? What kind of things I want to shoot for in 2023? And this is something that I do so that way every year I'm always taking a step forward. It's not something that I just have a dead year where I don't do anything. I don't want that. I don't want to be an individual that I just have 1, 2, 3 dead years where I'm not moving in some direction for the Lord. So I kind of wrote down some things here that I did in 2022 and what I plan on doing in 2023. I'm going to share this stuff with you, and I would encourage you to do the same thing. We have whiteboards in our classroom, and that's what I'm using here. I would encourage you, if you don't have a whiteboard, use a piece of paper, something, and do something similar. So I'm going to start off. As you can tell, I have 3 areas that I really want to focus on. And the first one being employment, the second one being ministry, and the third one being my personal and family life. So let me tell you why employment is something I want to talk about. The name of this channel is Bi-vocational Ministry, and bivocational means 2 vocations, okay? That means in one you have one vocation that you use to pay your bills and possibly pay for ministry and operate your life, and then you have a second vocation, usually that's a second vocation of ministry. And vocation, if you know Ephesians 4, vocation can be another word for calling. So I serve in a certain capacity here, and then I serve in a ministerial capacity here. Now, for those who don't know, I run my own business. I'm a lawn care worker. I didn't go to it. It came to me. It's a long story. And I started this business 6 years ago. I'm going into my 7th year now with it. It was something that I started a few years. When I started it, I thought, this is temporary. I don't even know if this is going to work. I'm just going to try it for a while. Ended up being a huge blessing to my family, and I've continued to do it. So I had specific goals for my employment this last year in 2022. And the goals were, for one, a reasonable amount of time. In my past, the difficulty that I've struggled with is either A, I had a job that consumed me in the sense I'd work 50, 60 plus hours a week. And trying to work 50, 60 hours a week, I was trying to be a husband, I was trying to be a father, and I was trying to do ministry. It was just impossible. And I'm like, surely there has to be a way to run a business to where I'm not in it all the time. And so I wanted to have a reasonable amount of time. And my average this last year, my average amount of time that I spent out in the field doing landscape work was about 32 hours to 35 hours a week. Now, to me, that's a huge win, because if I can provide for my family and fulfill my Christian duty to my wife and my children with 35 hours a week, 32, 35 hours a week, that's what I want to do. And so the employment, my goal was to get reasonable time. That was one. And I sure enough accomplished that. I'm very happy about that. Number 2, my employment had to be flexible. One of the things that we did this last year a lot, and you're going to see this when we get in the ministries, we traveled quite a bit. And I needed to know my business had to flex around my family and my ministry. And I because ministry opportunities come and you can't really change them. You can have a little bit of flexibility, but not a lot. So my goal is to make the business flexible. And sure enough, this year it was actually pretty flexible. I could cram. Good thing about owning a lawn care business is I could cram work into the beginning of my week and leave the end of my week more open to serve in ministry or be with my family or whatever. Or I could space it out during the week and leave my evenings open. Or I could even go in a little bit later and leave my mornings open. Now, I have to work around weather, and that's just a fact of life. But one thing I love about lawn care and landscaping for me is that it's that flexible. I get to make my schedule. I get to choose when I go out. I get to choose what that looks like. So it was reasonable amount of time, and it was flexible. So both those were a win. The third one here was enjoyable. No stress. I don't know about you, but when you have stress at work and you're not enjoying it and you're just kind of miserable there, your family life will suffer if you're not careful, and your ministry will suffer. So my goal was for the business basically to get to a point where it was operating itself. My goal was to get the business where the business did what the business did, and for what it's worth, I don't have employees. I've had opportunity to grow, but I've chosen not to. I've kept my business small on purpose because I don't want to be responsible for working other people. And but I did want to get my business to the point where my business did what it was going to do, and all I had to do was show up in the morning, and I knew exactly what I was supposed to do, and I knew what I was supposed to do, when I was supposed to do it. There's a routine there, and it's just day-to-day routine. That was my goal. So that way there was no stress. There was not me trying to figure something out all the time. I took particular efforts this year to kind of move away from customers that were causing me a lot of stress, and causing me a lot of stress because they weren't paying their bills, or they would try to get me to do stuff for free. And it's just like, you know what, I'm going to focus on the customers that aren't doing that, and I'm going to start implementing policies that would kind of keep those customers out. And that's something I'm going to move forward into next year as well. So my business did that actually very well. Very little to no stress. Very little to no stress for the business. I got up. I had a weekly routine. Every week I did either the same thing, or I'd have jobs that were set up that we'd set up a few weeks in advance, and it was just routine. Just step, step, step. I love being outside. One of the things that I love is I love feeling the warmth of the sun. I actually love feeling cold because it reminds me that I'm alive. I don't know if you're that way. I just love feeling the cold. I love being outside. I'm an outdoorsy kind of guy, and I would say, even though at first I could not stand landscaping years ago, I've really grown to enjoy it now, and it's something that I look forward to, and it's something that I definitely enjoy. So those were things that I would say were particular goals of this year that I was able to accomplish. And then the last one here is control it, not let it control me. And if any of you have ever had a job or own a business in particular, or a ministry, if you're not careful, it will control your life. It will take control, and it will dictate to you what you're going to do that day and that day and that day. And it will control so much of your life. And I have friends who are in business and doing the same thing I am, where it controls their every move, and their life they're wrestling it all the time. I didn't want to be in that. And I think based off what I've told you already, that was a win. Employment was a win. Now, as you can tell, up here, 2022, down here of 2023. And now, these are my goals for this year, for me. One is more consistency. The problem with landscaping and lawn care is that it's a feast and famine business. So in the springtime, you're feasting. I mean, there's work coming out your ears. You have people calling, hey, can you cut my grass? Hey, can you trim my bushes? Hey, can you do my mulch? Can you do stuff like that? And then if you don't get a lot of rain during the summer, you go through periods of drought where you're not doing a lot. And then in the fall time, it usually picks back up to where you're full blown busy again. And then in wintertime, it's dead work. So my goal this coming year, is more consistency. I've been branching out into other areas of work. So, for example, I'm very mechanically inclined. I have a big barn garage thing, and because of that, I can do a lot of mechanical services to mowers. I do all the maintenance and mechanical work to my machines. So I'm broadening that out, and so I'm doing maintenance and mechanical work to mowers this year or this winter at a small scale. And then hopefully, if that goes well, I will actually lessen my load during the rest of the year. So when springtime comes, I'll drop off a few of my customers, maybe in towns that I don't want to service anymore, and I won't feel the need to load my schedule down to compensate for a winter income, because my winter is compensated through winter maintenance and stuff. So that's kind of my goal, is more consistency. I want to try to level out the feast and famine. I know that with my type of business, you're going to have that. But if I can get that roller coaster hill just down a little bit, so where it's not crazy, that would be wonderful. Next one here is I'd like to do closer to home. Right now I work in, 5 different towns. near me, and I usually spend about an hour to 2 hours a day on the road, and that's just not a feasible option. It's not something I want to continue because I'm not making money. I'm actually spending money and wearing and tearing on my equipment and fuel. It's not a good method. So my goal this next year is to cut out the properties and cut my route down to maybe 2 or 3 towns instead of 5. That way I spend less time on the road, and guess what? Now I have more time with family or ministry and more time that I'm actually making money. So I want to be able to move some of my stuff closer to home. And then my next goal is more family involvement. I have 4 children, and in the past I've not been able to include them in much of my work because of the nature of it. Well, by operating more the mechanical side of things, I'm hopefully going to be able to involve my family in the business more, and that will allow me to spend more time with them and coach them and maybe show them what they can do when they get older as in regards to employment. And so my goal is to have them more involved so I can spend time with them, not just on a direct basis, but indirectly through the business. I'd like the business to really serve my family. And then I want to use the dead time to grow. Now, when you're doing lawn care like I do, I got a lot of dead time where I'm sitting on a mower and I'm trimming and I'm working. And I literally will work all day. And I have a lot of time to think. I have a lot of time to listen. I usually wear earbuds. And most of the time I would listen to podcasts and sermons and audio Bible. Those are the things I really listen to a lot. And I think that this next year, what I'd like to do is really invest into getting into audio books where I'm actually listening to books that I would be reading if I wasn't working. And that way I'm making intentional efforts for personal growth instead of just listening to another podcast about something that probably doesn't even matter. And really using that time for personal growth. And that way I'm still growing while I'm working, and I'm getting paid to listen to things that helps me grow as a minister and as a father and as a husband and everything else. And so that's kind of my goals for employment. Now, one thing I want to say is there are some years of your life that you're going to make drastic changes. And 3 years ago, that was one of our times of life. We made a drastic change. It took us a year to build up to that change. We made the change, and then the next two years was kind of trying to figure out what our life was going to look like. And then this third year, we really started honing in on where we're going now. And it just takes a while, but most of the time, if you're starting to move in a really healthy direction, you don't have to make huge, drastic changes. You just make small, minor changes like I'm doing here to make your life more usable to God, make your life more more usable to God. You're redeeming your life. You're redeeming your time for the sake of the gospel and for the sake of the kingdom. So those are how I would view my employment. That's my goal this year, is to have my employment to do that. I have left the world of trying to get out of the business. I am now in the world of trying to get the business to serve me. And felt like great progress last year. Looking forward to what I can do this year. Now let's move over to my recap of ministry. I spent most of my year this year teaching theology. Particularly the theology I was teaching was a Christ-centered hermeneutic. How do we understand the scriptures? And I would hold to Christocentrism. So I taught that. I talked about the kingdom of God and how important it is in the gospel. And then I also talked about the theology of living that out as a kingdom citizen. And I was traveling to different churches teaching those particular things to those churches. And we ended up traveling 10,000 miles last year. And this was including multiple states around us. I think we went to Michigan, we've been to Indiana, we went to Kentucky, we've been in Tennessee, we've been in Pennsylvania, we were in Maryland, we were a little bit in West Virginia. I mean, we traveled quite a bit last year teaching these theological principles. Not just those, but if you look at my Principles of Missions, Evangelism, and Teaching course in the channel, that came from teaching at a school that I was able to teach there too, and I include a lot of theology there. So I spent a lot of time teaching theology. I spent a lot of time traveling, and when I traveled, I always traveled with my family and ministered to churches that way. Last year, I finished my book. Now, I wrote the book 2 or 3 years ago, and I decided to go ahead and publish the book. So I finished my book last year and published it, and that was a good experience for me. I won't say it was amazing, but it was a good experience. I got to learn the publishing process, and I got to hopefully benefit other ministers, and that was one of my goals, and I did it, and I was happy to do that. One of the negative parts of last year, and this kind of goes into what we were talking about, I put fellowship ceasing, and I almost put fellowship failure, but it really wasn't a failure. What we started out our year doing was we started out saying, hey, we're going to start a fellowship which will be a church. And I've done church planting in my past, and I have done church revitalization, so I said I'm going to move into this world. I'm going to go back into church planting. And we started the fellowship, and or church. We started the church, which is an assembly of fellowship. We started the church. Everything was going really great. Our home church was in support of it. We were really making some great progress. We were doing so well. We averaged out attendance around 30 to 35 people, which for a church plant, which is pretty amazing. Here was the problem. My traveling kept coming up. Once or twice a month, our family would be out of town, and I could not do the church plant. And so during the middle of the year, or near the fall, so it was like September, I had to have a hard conversation with my church planting coach and a couple of my mentor elders from our home church. And I basically said, here's my dilemma. I'm traveling a lot, and so I don't have the time to invest into the church plant. And I said, and it doesn't look like my traveling's slowing down as much as it should for the church plant. And my church planting coach, I think, gave me some very wise advice. He goes, there is no such thing as a part-time church planter. You're going to have to choose one. Either you're going to have to continue the church plant and stop traveling, or you're going to have to cease the church plant, or at least postpone it and continue traveling. And we prayed about it for a few months. We prayed about it from last, I'd say, August through October, November. And we felt like the Lord really wanted us to focus on our traveling and speaking at different churches and encouraging them. And so the church plant went on hold. Now, I don't view that as a failure, because it's not like I tried and it just didn't work out. It was working out. It's just I had two great opportunities and I had to choose one. My problem in my past is once I decide to do something, I'll stick to it even if it's a bad decision. And I'm really trying to take the words of James seriously. That I say, well, if I'm going to go to this such and such town and buy and sell and make a profit, he goes, you should say if the Lord wills, you should do that, do this or that. And I'm like, you know what, he's right. As much as I want to say, I want to commit to doing this, the truth is, everything changes, and I got to be willing to change with it. And so we chose to travel, and that's what we're going to do more this year. So the fellowship has been postponed, maybe not forever, but at least postponed. And now I'm investing more into the traveling side of it, at least making the traveling side the emphasis of where we're going, because we were burning out. One or 2 weekends a month, we were traveling, and it just wasn't good. So here's my goals for 2023 for my ministry. Is one, more time for study and writing. I have found out that writing is something that I'm strong at. Now, I have a problem that I always want to focus on my weaknesses, but writing is one of my strengths, and I've been doing quite a bit of it this last year, and I want to study more. And so this year, my goal is to make sure I take time to study. If that includes personal reading of the scriptures, reading through them quite a bit. Studying of different theological points, and then also writing about those and giving those to the church to help encourage the church. I feel like the Lord wants me to focus on that area. Seems like He's gifted me in that area, so that's what I want to do. Less travel. We've already made an agreement within our home that we would only travel once a month. So once a month, we would, one weekend out of the month or 1 week or whatever, we'll go travel to a church and speak, or go to a school and speak, or go to a retreat and speak. But then the rest of the month, we're home. We're here. Because it was just too much. One weekend we'd be packing up, We get home 10 p.m. Sunday night. I go work Monday morning. And then sure enough, Thursday we're packing, and then Friday we're heading back out. It was just too much to do that as often as we're, and also postponing the church plant. So we're limiting our travel to one travel per month, and I think that's going to be healthy. And then the third one here is I want to do some more teaching. I have the opportunity to be a benefit and a blessing to the elders in my church because of this, and I'm going to do more of it. And again, it's one of those things where over the last few years, I've seen that writing and studying and teaching has been a strong suit where I've been weak in other areas. So instead of saying, I'm going to work on those weak areas, I'm going to really focus on my teaching, studying, writing, and edifying the church in a way that I can actually do so well. And so that's what I want to do more. So 2023 in regards to ministry, my goal is more study, less travel, and more teaching. Now, moving on to my personal, this last year was a good year. I have some very wise men in my life that I have really tried to be intentional about building relationships with, going out for coffee in the morning, phone calls, meeting personally regularly. My goal, I've done more of that, and I want to continue doing that in 2023, having them over to my house, feeding them dinner so I can hear them speak, because these are very wise and older men. I want that. God has given me so many wonderful men in my life and they have been such a benefit, not just to me, but my family. I want to continue that. The one thing we did was regular discipleship, and this both includes for my family about being personally involved. And one thing we notice about the feast and famine and travel and church planting is, man, it can eat away at family discipleship. And as a husband and father, my primary role is in my home with my children and my wife. But we are doing more regular discipleship with new converts, and I'm trying to do a lot better about making sure I'm checking in, making sure we're meeting, making sure I'm taking the initiative and inviting them over, going out for coffee, and building those types of relationships. So it's different in the sense of I'm not trying to grow a church, but I am trying to invest into relationships and personal discipleship and make it a regular part of life and help them make it a regular part of life. Personal growth, I did a lot of that this year in regards to I put myself in situations that made me a bit uncomfortable. I've never traveled this much in my life. Actually, I've done very little traveling in my ministry experience, and then I went from little no traveling to 10,000 miles. And for me, that's a lot. And that's 10,000 miles on top of our regular driving. That doesn't mean 10,000 miles for all year, just for everything. 10,000 miles just in ministry travel. And so my growth has been good this year. I want it to continue. For here, you'll see a ministry fit. This last year, 2022, I particularly focused on telling ministry where I fit instead of letting ministry tell me where I fit. And it's kind of twofold. I did not try to open doors that just weren't open. And I also tried to only focus on the ministry opportunities that I fit well into. Because I've always kind of taken this approach of, hey, if it's in front of you, just do it. And I've tried to kind of pull back from that and say, just because it's in front of you doesn't mean you should just go do it. What you should do is say, do I fit this? And then move forward in that direction. So I've really been doing that, and that's been a big blessing for me. In marital investment, in about a month, I will have been married for 15 years to a wonderful lady who we've had 4 children with, and I cannot believe how amazing she is and the deserving of my time that she deserves. And I want to make sure she's a priority. So that was one thing I started last year, and I've started it before, but last year I made intentional efforts to do so, and it was good and something I want to continue. Simplicity of life. This one was something that this is not just a last year thing. This was actually the last few years. One is getting out of debt. It's really hard to be a bi-vocational minister and have the time you need and have the opportunities you need if you're always paying off tremendous amounts of debt. So my goal was to be out of debt, and we are. Outside of our house, we have a mortgage, but outside of that, we're debt free. And not only do we have a mortgage, we bought well below what we could afford. And what that means is I don't have to make a lot of money because I don't have an expensive lifestyle. I don't have all these bills that are coming in. I don't have a huge house payment coming in. We have simplified our life to where I don't feel those pressures to have and get and obtain and have a bigger house and a newer car. I've really focused on simplifying our life. Less bills, less debt, and making our life something that's not stressful. And it's actually been very helpful. And I think it's actually a point of doctrine. I think that's actually a Christian thing to do. And that's one thing we try to do. And in weight loss, I lost 80 pounds this last year. Because last year my right knee started giving me problems. I knew I was unhealthy. And so I lost 80 pounds last year. All right. So now let's move on to personal family for the next, for 2023. What are my goals? Well, I would like to start to learn Greek. I have a Greek New Testament. I know how to use my Greek New Testament. I've gotten pretty familiar with it, but I could not read Greek. And one of the mentors I have, he actually reads Hebrew and Greek. Like you can actually sit there and just read it. I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to read Greek. So my goal is to learn Greek this year. One of my other goals is to more family devotions and time. And last year with the church plant, with the traveling, with ministry, with all that, even though everything was going wonderful, I really need to spend more time with my family. You saw in a couple videos ago, we have a retreat cottage, and our goal is to go out there 5 or 6 times a year. Just go out there, spend the weekend, grill out. Just go out there as a family retreat. And then we went twice last year. And I want to make sure I'm spending time because once they're grown, they're gone. And I only have one chance to be a dad to them and be a husband for my wife. And I want to make sure that ministry doesn't become an idol that steals me from my family. So I want more family devotions, and that includes their spiritual and spiritual lives. I want to make sure I focus on investing in their spiritual growth, that they're growing as my family too. The next thing next year I want to do is I want to invest into my teaching and writing skills. Even though I feel like it's a strength of mine, I have so much work to do. I really don't feel like I can doing this to my capacity. And some of that's for various reasons. One, because I haven't done it for a while. I used to preach every week and teach every week, and I was constantly preaching and teaching. And then I kind of got out of it for a couple years, and I'm kind of rusty. One. Number two, kind of hesitant to get back into it. I don't know if that makes sense. I got out of it, and I'm getting back into it full swing. But man, when I see myself teaching or I listen to an audio record, I could definitely tell that there's some hesitation. And I just also feel like I need to invest into those skills. I need to learn how to write better and articulate better. I need to learn how to teach in a way that people are understanding. I need to teach in a way that people are going to be able to remember. I want to invest in that part, so that way I'm not just a faithful teacher, but a good teacher. And so people are learning. And so I want to invest into that. So that's one of my goals. And then work on a great marriage and a home. I want my wife to know that she's loved and love being in our marriage. And I want a nice, happy home. We live in a crazy world. And so my goal is to make sure we have a nice, happy home, a happy marriage, and where we're loving on each other, and where we are encouraging one another, and where we are just investing in our marriage and getting to know one another even more, even after 15 years. And then having a home that our kids look back and say, boy, I loved growing. Mom and Dad were great. We just had such a great home and spent time together as a family and loved it. That's my goal for this year, is to continue moving that direction. And then lastly, more camping. As I said, I want to camp. We built that out there. The kids love it out there at our campsite, our cottage retreat. And I just want to go out there and camp. I want to spend time with them. And I just have areas where I spend too much time doing other things that I could be moving in that direction. So anyway, this was kind of a rundown. I thought that I would share kind of my goals with you, what I was shooting for 22, what I did in 2022 and 2023. I'm hoping I'm going to challenge you that if you have not set down some goals for 2023 and say, hey, this is what I want to do in 2023, then do it. And it doesn't have to be huge stuff. as you said, just more consistent, closer, and you're just redefining a little bit of your life. And then hopefully within 5 years or 10 years, you can look back and say, boy, I've really, really grown a lot, and I've really done what I felt like God wants me to do. So anyway, I hope this video was a blessing. I hope it was encouragement to you. And I hope you guys have a great day, and God bless.